So thank you to everybody for joining today from wherever you do happen to be joining. According to my clock, we are nearly 2 minutes past the hour, so we're going to get underway. This is Asia Talent Mobility Alliance, or ATMA as we like to call ourselves, Australia Market Update. So very happy to welcome Wanda, Amanda and Avron today to give us an update on what's going on in Australia. And we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping first. ATMA, if you've not heard of our organisation, this is a little bit about us. I'm not going to read through all of this, but ATMA exists to enhance the innovation and development of talent mobility in Asia. We'd love for you all to become members of our organisation. We try to be inclusive as possible by keeping our fees very reasonable, and we really would love to have all of you join us so that we can make this industry better and continue some great work that has been laid by the founding members of the organisation, of which you can see them here. So this is our current board, full of people from across the industry in different roles in different locations across Asia. So you can reach out to any of us if you're interested in ATMA's activities. We have 4 pillars within ATMA. We look at ESG and sustainability, advocacy, education and development. You may have heard of our mentorship program. So a lot of what we do is in the education space these days. And then events and networking, which includes the webinar that we're doing today. So our agenda for today, a fairly basic agenda, but important, on updating you on what's going on in Australia. So we have housing, visa and immigration, education, and the global mobility landscape. And we've also added just a little bit on the cost of living, status of cost of living in Australia. These are our wonderful panelists today. It's a pleasure to be able to moderate this session today. I'll just have them briefly introduce themselves. So, Avron, you want to start?
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. Delighted to be here. I'm Avram Goldberg. I'm the Senior Vice President for the Asia Pacific region for WICAT Workforce Mobility, based out of Hong Kong. In APAC, we have teams based in China, Singapore, Hong Kong, and most recently Australia. And I have end responsibility for both client engagement and service delivery. And also delighted to be a member of the board of directors of ATMA.
Thank you, Avron. Just a little bit, voice is a little bit light there, so I might want to speak up just a little bit more going forward.
Thanks.
Thank you. Amanda.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Steve, for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here today. My name is Amanda Tinner. I work at Visa Executive. We're an Australian-based immigration law firm. We specialise in the corporate sector, so helping companies find their way through the behemoth of changes and paperwork that we have to get expats into Australia. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Amanda. And last but not least, Wanda.
Thank you for this great opportunity to share information about our wonderful country. I'm Wanda Smith. I'm the Managing Director for International Consultant Centre. We are a destination service provider in Australia and in just about every location you can think of in Australia, in major cities and regional town centres. And I'm excited to share some updates with you today.
Thank you, Wanda. And we're actually going to be going to you first on housing. So I'll let you take things away. Thank you.
Okay, great. As I mentioned, Australia is a wonderful country to live in, but it's expensive and it's getting more expensive. The individuals that we work with and help when they arrive in Australia are genuinely shocked at the cost of living and in particular the cost of housing. Just a little example that I'll give you, and I've spoken to Avron about this before, is I buy butter. It's a $3.75 little container of butter, which 4 months ago was $5. 3 months ago, it was $6. 1 month ago, $8. And 2 weeks ago, I went and the same container of butter was $9.50. So that's a little example of how things are jumping here in Australia. And if you're trying to make ends meet and counting your pennies, that really hurts. 2025's rental market is defined by high demand, low vacancy rates, and affordability stress. The happy place in Australia is a vacancy rate that is 3%, and that's a balance of supply and demand. The vacancy rate for 2025 year on year was 1.2% in Australia, so not a happy place. Australia is a very unique country. As you know, it's a dispersed population over a very large area, with our populations mainly being in the coastal cities and very relatively low density of population. So it's important to not think of Australia as a homogenous country regarding housing, and the cost of living and even lifestyle varies greatly. We have 6 states and 2 territories, and they all differ very greatly in housing legislation, housing availability, and affordability. Example is Sydney overall, with the cost of living and housing, is the most expensive city in Australia. Canberra is the most expensive for buying food. Adelaide is the most expensive for electricity. In New South Wales, for example, the break lease fees are predetermined by the amount of time that you have used up exhausted in your lease. So if you've spent less than 25%, if you break the lease, you will pay 4 weeks rent. And it's a sliding scale depending on the length of your lease and how much time is exhausted, which differs greatly from Victoria, where the break lease, you will have to pay rent. Sorry, you have to pay the rent until a new tenant is found. And there's reletting fees as well as advertising fees. So that's an example just how the states differ greatly. There are many macro factors that affect the housing market in all the different locations in Australia. Population growth has a lot of effect. New projects in smaller locations have a booming effect, as well as investor shifts. In Australia, from the pandemic to now, we've seen a complete shift in investors not wanting to rent long-term, but going Airbnb and getting that instant cash at a higher rate. So that definitely affects long-term renters in the market. Perth, for example, has the fastest population growth in all of the capital cities in Australia. So that puts enormous pressure on the accommodation supply and the cost of accommodation, both long-term and short-term in Perth. The national median rent rise for 2025 was 3.4%. Perth sits at 6.2%, and in some of the more popular expat suburbs, up to 13%. Port Hedland is a regional area in way north in Western Australia, and they had a rental rise of 11.8% based on a big project that was going into that area. So what are the effects of a tight market that favors the landlord on a person that's moving to Australia? Well, the property turnover is very quick. The viewing times are very limited and set for 15-minute chunks, and they're set, the viewing schedule is set by the property manager. Often you'll go to the viewing and you'll have 20 to 70 people at every viewing. So the competition is extremely high. They will have multiple applications, often 20 to 40 applications for every property. The ultimate decision is with the property owner. So as you can imagine, they can pick and choose who they want. So if you have someone coming from Bangladesh or someone coming from France, as opposed to an Australian who has a long rental history, we have to think of creative ways to stand apart from the crowd. How then can applicants stand out is the big question, and what we have to be aware of now. So to be application ready, submit a complete application for everyone that's over 18 years old that's going to be living at the property is critical. Have your rental and work references ready, bank statements, pay slips, bios for your family with a little picture, and even your dog to exhibit what their talents are, that they may have completed training school, but it's a little thing, and things like that make you stand ahead of the crowd. Ensure that you qualify for the property that you're applying for. And agents will eliminate 20 of the 40 applications if they don't abide by the 30% rule. So in Australia, they want you to be able to support the rental rate, and you can't apply for something that exceeds 30% of your gross income. So for example, if you want to live 48 kilometers outside of Perth, the average rental for a 3-bedroom property is $600 per week. If you apply the 30% rule, you actually need to be earning approximately $104,000 as a combined household. If you're wanting to live within 10 kilometers of the CBD, which a lot of the expats do, or even up to 15, the average price in Perth right now for a 3-bedroom property is $1,045, which means you would need to be earning an income of $190,000 gross. So it's just something to be aware of. You also have to have money ready when you apply for property if you are successful, because within 24 hours of them offering you the property, you will have to pay a 2-week holding deposit, and you'll have to pay the bond if you proceed with the property. So you do need to have cash on hand or have the ability to transfer funds into the account of the property manager. So in summary, the vacancy rates are easing, but are still very low. Demand is extremely high still, and it varies from state to state and location to location. Rents are still rising, but the latest data out from SQM is that they're rising slower than they have been in previous quarters, and it continues to be a landlord's market. The best advice that I can share is that you seek information in advance about the specific host location, because as I said, it's not generic amongst Australian states, in order to prepare the employees that are in transition to give them the best chance that they can. That's it.
Okay, Amanda, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Hello, everybody. As I mentioned before, my name's Amanda Tinner, and I'm a registered migration agent, and I've been practicing in this space for just over 25 years. One thing that is very certain, and listening to Wanda speak about the costs, is that in the Australian immigration space, there will be change. There will be an increase in application fees every year, and our processing times are getting longer. So if you are looking at working in Australia or sending expats or any of your colleagues to Australia, my advice is don't wait, and when you're ready to make the application, move, because change will happen. We usually get a fee increase on the 1st of July. 1st of July is the beginning of our financial year, and our fee increases usually happen by CPI, which is around 2 to 3% at the moment. So as of the 1st of July, the visa application fees for 482s are now looking at, just for the principal applicant, so the main person coming to work, is $3,210. If they have a family, say a wife and 2 children, you're looking at anywhere between $12,000 to $15,000 just in government fees to look at bringing out a person to Australia to work for you under the 482 program. That's our main sponsored visa, the 482. The criteria is pretty much like most of the countries around the world that have migration programs. You need a company in Australia that's operating. You can also have a sponsoring company that's operating overseas that sends you to Australia on assignment. The longest stay in Australia that you can obtain is 4 years, and you can do that again and again. It's ad infinitum. There's no maximum stay you can have on the 482. An interesting, one of the interesting criteria on a 482 is that you can bring your children out, ideally up to the age of 18. The hard cutoff is 23, but between 18 and 23, they need to be studying full-time, ideally at a university. You can also bring your partner out. And a unique situation in the 482 criteria is when we talk about partner, you can be married, common law, or what we call de facto, or same-sex partners. And the partner, in my opinion, actually gets a better deal than the person who's coming out to work, because the partner gets full work rights without any restrictions, compared to the 482 visa holder who actually has to stay with a sponsor throughout their whole term living in Australia. Again, on the 1st of July, we had a minimum salary increase. So when we talk about minimum salary, that is the minimum that the expat must be paid. And that increased to 76,515 Australian dollars. And that is per annum. And that's what we call guaranteed earnings. So we can't include bonuses or overtime in that. And that minimum salary of 76,515 is regardless of where you live in the country. So I heard that Wanda mentioned about the regional areas in Australia. There are some immigration concessions if you're looking at moving people to a regional area. But the minimum salary for the 482, regardless of whether you're in Melbourne, Sydney, or as Wanda mentioned, Port Hedland, which is far north Western Australia, the minimum salary is still $76,515. Our federal government controls immigration department, and processing times are a very big grudge in my world, because although all of our applications are lodged online, a lot of people think that it's going to be a whiz-bang portal and they can see where their application is up to and see what's going on with their application. But unfortunately not. Once an application is lodged, it goes into the ether, and we don't know what happens to it until either we get an approval, a decision, or we get a request for further information. So processing times, unfortunately, we have little control over, and we just have to wait for the immigration department to make their decision. Our applications, being everything processed online, they can be decided in Melbourne, Sydney, or even an overseas office. Some applications are decided in Perth and some in Adelaide. So we don't actually know where your application goes. We wait with bated breath every morning for emails to come into our inbox to see what's happening with them. All we can do with processing times is figure out what we are seeing in our practice at the moment. So just to give you an idea, on a 482, from lodgement, we're looking at anywhere between 2 to 6 months. And a lot of people think, but I can't wait that long. What's the quickest way? Can't I speak to somebody? Unfortunately, no. We used to have the ability to actually walk into an office before COVID, but post-COVID, immigration closed all their offices, and we can't actually walk in and speak to anybody anymore. So it's a bit of an experience wand that we wave around looking at processing times. Let me touch on permanent residence, because it's a question that we get asked a lot about. Permanent residence has definitely increased across the board since Australia reopened its borders 3 years ago. So anybody is eligible for permanent residence when they're sponsored on a 482, as long as their employer is looking at sponsoring them for permanent residence. And the main criteria is that an age cutoff of 45. There is one exception. So 45 years of age and 2 years with your employer working for them full-time on a 482. So permanent residence is is really something that a lot of people ask about. And there's a couple of main reasons why they do so. One of the big push factors is that when you come to Australia on a sponsored 482, most countries you do not have access to what we call Medicare or our national health insurance program. So that can be a big push factor. A lot of people, you are ineligible to buy a property, to buy a house. So to Wanda's point, a lot of people have no option but to rent. And the last main push factor is that for expats having children who want to go to university in Australia, it becomes very expensive unless you are a permanent resident. So they're the three main push factors for people applying for permanent residence. And the main benefit is to the employee. Processing times at the moment from lodgement, and usually I say from lodgement because on average it takes, let's say, 2 months approximately to get all the paperwork ready to go. Processing times at the moment are anywhere around the 12-month mark, sometimes creeping up to the 14th, 15th, 16th month from lodgement. So you're looking at a good year, at least 1 year from lodging a permanent residence. The benefit of permanent residence to a lot of people is that once you've been a permanent resident for 1 year, coming off of 482, you can apply for citizenship. And Australia allows dual citizenship, thanks to Rupert Murdoch. He was the gentleman who at the time was forbidden from taking out US citizenship. He wanted to buy Fox Studios, but he had to relinquish his Australian citizenship. So he had a chat to the Prime Minister and the rules were changed. So we all thank Rupert Murdoch for Australian citizens now being able to hold several passports. So that's a good thing. As I mentioned, the benefits of permanent residence, I put them in the PowerPoint just to make you understand why a lot of people may ask you as an employer for permanent residence, and it really is a cost saving for them and possibly for the sponsor as well. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so back to Wanda now.
Thank you,
to take us
Amanda.
through education.
Yeah, that was awesome. I myself am a dual citizen between
There
Canada.
we go.
So happy days, happy days.
Happy days.
Yeah. We have 3 main types of schooling in Australia. Each have different costs, cultures, and enrollment processes. We have government schools, which are public and they're run by the state, Catholic, which are low-fee private and are faith-based, and independent, which are private, fee-paying, and they varied education philosophies. Let's just delve a little bit deeper into those. Government schools, if you're new to the country and you say, I'm just going to go to the local school, you must live in the school zone. So every school in Australia will have a defined zone, which will list the specific area right down to the block and the house number that you must live in that zone to attend that school. Even if you're 1 block outside or 3 houses outside, you will not be able to go to that school unless they have not reached their capacity for enrollment. So that's very important to note. State fees do apply in some states for visa 482 holders, but again, not in all states. And those can range from $5,000 to $7,200 per year per student. When you apply for a public school, you just go to the school that's in your zone and you apply at the school and you need to show your visa. You need to prove your residential address. They will often ask for a utility bill and a copy of your lease as well. And then you will be responsible. You may have to pay for school uniforms on top of that and extracurricular activities, which can range up to $500 voluntary contribution a year, but you're pressured quite a bit to make that voluntary contribution. Catholic schools, you can select the preferred school that you have. So my recommendation that you prefer. So you need to call the school that you have in mind ahead of time to see if they have vacancy. Then you apply through the diocese and you provide your documentation, plus you will be asked to go to an interview. You may be asked to have a reference from a parish priest. Catholic schools will fill their enrollment with Catholic faith-based students first, and then when their enrollment is, if they have determined it's not at capacity, they will allow non-Catholic students to go to the schools. Those schools are private, and they're $2,500 to $8,000 a year. As you'll notice, if you're having to pay state school fees for a public school, that is very similar. So it's placing more pressure on the Catholic schools because parents are saying, well, I'm going to go to a private school, then we'll go to the Catholic school. The class sizes are smaller. You get more of a culture that we're after, and it's the same fee as going to a state school. Again, Victoria, you don't pay state school fees, but in New South Wales or in South Australia, you'll be asked to do that. Independent schools are high demand and they're expensive. Intake years from public schools, so parents will start their schools typically in Australia in a public school, and then they'll shift their kids into independent schools. So the key intake years are years 5, 7, and 9. And then at times year 11 and 12, parents will bundle their kids to do the final 2 years in an independent school. In Australia, we have single-sex, co-ed schools, international baccalaureate schools, faith-based independent schools, and non-faith-based schools. It is a great idea for you to call the school, talk to the registrar first prior to applying, because now schools, independent schools, because they're so oversubscribed, are asking $300 to $500 non-refundable per application. So you might as well make sure that there's a spot there for your child. Independent schools now in Australia across the board would range from $24,000 to $50,000 a year, and that plus you have to pay for school uniforms, which can be $500 to $1,700 depending on how many changes of clothing you want to buy your children, plus books, plus extracurricular activities. And just to note, in independent schools, very often there'll be mandatory weekend sports. So that's quite different than the public school system. Our school terms, as you probably already know, are late January to mid-December. This is a point of concern for people coming from the Northern Hemisphere. Our schools will traditionally like to keep students within their same age peer group, so they're not all that keen in shifting students up or holding them back. They would rather hold them back to be with the majority that are in their age group when they arrive. Each school type and each school varies in the facilities that they have. Private schools have many facilities, often will have a swimming pool, cricket grounds, basketball courts. Class size definitely in private schools are smaller than in public schools and have more extracurricular activities to choose from. Each school, whether you're a public school or a private school, will have a different school environment and a different culture. And that is often up to the headmaster or the principal or the parent groups that are at the school. Each one has a very different personality. Academic performances vary from school to school, and also the languages that they offer. Some schools will offer Japanese, and some will offer 2 or 3 languages, Japanese, German, and French. So again, you can view all of that online when you look at the individual schools. The level of support, if you have a child with special needs, does vary greatly from school to school, and it is most certainly something that you should, if your child has any issues or any learning skills that they need special support for, you need to talk to the school that you're interested in to see if that child can be supported adequately. All Australian students take an annual assessment in literacy and numeracy. It's called the NAPLAN. And this happens in years 3, 5, 7, and 9. The data that is released from those results is available to the public, and often parents will look at those results to say, okay, this school is quite high achieving. The students get a good result. Therefore, I believe that the teaching, it's a good environment for my child, who I want them to do well in those areas, should go to. It is one way to look at a school, but as mentioned previously, you do need to look at the culture, the people at the school, the demographics of the school to see if it is a good fit for your family. The government in Australia will never use the NAPLAN results to rank schools. It's only a source of information. Australian schools in general are quite multicultural and are very supportive of students with varying levels of English skills. So the education system in Australia has policies and resources in place to support students that are learning English. Again, this varies greatly from state to state. In Victoria, for example, if your child is not at the level that they can easily communicate and work within the existing school system, they will be sent to a school at the short term that will help them develop the skills necessary so they can transition easier to the public school when their skills have increased. The education system in Australia is generally well regarded around the world. We're known for our comprehensive curriculum, but mostly we are known for our strong emphasis on student well-being. Just a note for those that don't know, school uniforms, whether it's in a public school or a private school, are generally mandatory. The one consistent thing that is consistent amongst both private and public schools is there's a saying called no hat, no play. So all the students have to bring a hat to school because our UV rating is so bad that they won't let them out to play unless everybody's slip, slap, and slop well covered. So that's a brief overview of the education and the update on schools in Australia.
Thank you very much, Wanda. So just before we move over to Avron, I'm going to just give a little bit of information that has been provided to us by ECA International, who is one of our founding partners or foundation partners here at ATMA. So this may contradict a little bit of what Wanda has said, but in general, global inflation is around 2 to 3% right now, and Australia falls sort of within that inflation range right now. So according to ECA, Australia is unlikely to have inflation be causing any cost of living allowance changes. Now that's from a policy perspective. What you heard about the butter in Australia is a little bit different. So there may be obviously certain items in Australia that are more costly now than they were before. This is not saying that Australia is not a very expensive country, which we know it is, according to what Wanda has just spoken to us about. Exchange rates, the Australian dollar has strengthened against a lot of the currencies in the world. That could see some companies looking at their COLAs and perhaps reviewing their indices and things with regards to policy. But that's just a little bit of information from ECA International. And I'm now going to move over to Avron to give us a bit of an update on the trends in the global mobility world, including Australia.
Thanks, Steve. One of the little known facts about mobility or relocation, as it used to be called back in the day, about mobility in Australia is that outside of the UK, US, and Canada, Australia has the longest established relocation or global mobility market on the planet in all directions. And by that, I mean inbound into the country, outbound from the country, and domestically within. Whilst only 5 Australian headquartered companies are actually part of the Fortune 500, Australia has a strong representation and has had for some time in several global industries, including mining and minerals, first and foremost, financial services, technology, engineering, and construction. So for mining and minerals, think BHP, Rio Tinto, Fortescue, South 32, Newcrest, which is now part of Newmont Mining. For financial services, think National Australia Bank, ANZ, or Commonwealth Bank. For IT, think Atlassian or Canva. And in the engineering construction space, think GDH, Oricon, and Lendlease. Little known fun fact, 83%, yes, 83% of all Fortune 500 companies rely on Atlassian software and services. They have a total of 180,000 customers worldwide across 190 countries. So can't really get much more global than that. Despite rising inflation, disrupted supply chains, and basically overall challenging economic environment, Australia is actually surprisingly robust in digital economy terms, especially for the growth area for comprising small and medium enterprises or startups in that area. Australia is basically evolving. Australia is an evolving launchpad for many startups with global ambitions. A recent study pointed to fully 1/3 of SMEs already operating internationally in some way, shape, or form. Some examples being Australian retail, online retailer Orbit Key in the US and Asia, and plant-based products Delishu expanding in UK and Europe. The same study also showed that the majority of Australian-based SMEs are planning to be operational internationally within the next 5 years, and currently 1/3 of them actually are. So, ultimately, I think despite a variety of the economic wins and challenges and cross-border and international activity into Australia and outbound from Australia is largely stable and regular and likely to remain so. The really unique story in many respects relative to Australia, global mobility in Australia, or mobility in Australia, is about domestic. And I want to talk a little bit about that for a second. I'm going to leverage off of sharing some statistics in a very recent Mercer study, which was released on domestic Australia, a very comprehensive study conducted by Mercer, which was released recently about the domestic sector, starting off with what's actually driving the robustness that remains front and center in domestic mobility in Australia. It's project need, technical skill, and career leadership development are all equally key drivers for domestic mobility in Australia. Domestic mobility is an established phenomenon, really, with its own unique set of characteristics. All sectors drive domestic mobility in Australia, drive domestic activity, but none drives it quite so hard as does the mining and mineral sector. The sheer size of Australia, which basically is the equivalent of all of Europe, with the exception of that bit of Russia that is actually counted as part of Europe. So that's a good way of relativizing it. You can actually fit all of North, South, West, and Eastern Europe, with the exception of that part of Europe that is actually counted, west of the Urals. So the sheer size of Australia is a driver for domestic being a key consideration from a corporate perspective. Because of the nature of mining and minerals, there's a dizzying abundance of remote to very remote locations that can be involved, where workers and employees and their families are required to move to. It's not only mining and minerals, of course, that drives domestic activity in Australia. Technology, finance, engineering, construction are definitely all equally active in that area. But some of the more fun facts to share about the vigorous domestic Australian market drawn from this latest Mercer study are next slide, please, Steve. So you've got a whopping close to 2/3 of Australian corporate respondents saying that they plan to review their entire domestic mobility policy as of today. We're talking 2025. You've got 55%, so well over half, considering housing affordability and cost of living as an obstacle to domestic mobility. And you got, which obviously there's a link between those two, right? I mean, I think everything that we've heard about the difficulties in terms of housing and the difficulties in terms of cost of living are actually forcing a lot of companies to review their policies, their domestic policies. Domestic also requires, and it's interesting to see that you've got, basically 57% of Australian companies providing housing allowances for remote locations, and you've got a further 68%, which is a real whopping number, providing not only housing allowances in remote locations, but also providing relocation assistance, which of course is good news for destination service providers in Australia. Also interesting to note that you got 44% of respondents to this Mercer survey talking about their expectation of an increase in the permanent one-way moves over 2025 and into 2026. Lastly, only observation I would want to share is that one of the foundation products and foundation benefits in Australian domestic relocation is the product known as home sale. Companies going back several decades when the service or program originated were provide very robust financial support to people who needed to dispose of their houses in their home location and then be released to be cash buyers in the host location. Often traveling, obviously having to move great distances over what is a very large country. Over the decades, this costly benefit has been whittled away at, and it's now very much a minority of organizations, again, primarily in the mining and mineral sector, that still have some type of fairly robust, anything like some type of robust support in assistance, helping people dispose of their homes in selling terms. And we expect to see that push against the home sale benefits continue, and also the caps that are put on various levels of support, such as brokerage fees, reimbursement of brokerage fees, or support for advertising costs, or support for selling marketing campaigns, attorneys' fees, conveyancing fees, etc., that the caps on all of these costly add-ons in the selling process, that those caps will be low, will be lowered, will continue to be lowered. That's it from me, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of our presentation now. But I would like to just share with you a very important upcoming event for ATMA. So together with the Res Forum, we will be entering into our inaugural conference the coming September the 25th in Singapore. So we very much look forward to having you all attend our inaugural conference. So we've come to the end of the presentation. I don't have any questions for our panelists. We're already at the 45-minute mark. So I think we will just close things up right here. Thank you for everybody that joined today. And I look forward to our next opportunity to share updates. So thank you very much to our panelists. And thank you to all for tuning in today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.